So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint this colorful watercolor flower in Procreate. As usual, I'll list the brushes I'm using for this in the description. So as you can see, I've already got a pretty simple sketch placed in here, and you can download this for free in the description if you want. I just placed it in here as the top layer and set it to multiply, and then I lowered the opacity to make it a little bit more subtle. And then to start painting, I'll make sure I'm on a blank layer down here below everything. And the first thing I'm going to do is lay down a background wash for each of the petals. So for that, I'll use the medium quill brush. And I'm going to change the color a couple of times just so each petal isn't the same. But I'm basically going to do them all the same way. So I'm going to start kind of with a light pressure. And then I'll press harder around the top. Then go back down and then lighten the pressure again. And I'm going to do 3 segments for each petal. And I'll repeat this process for each petal, and I'll slightly shift the color each time. After that, I'll turn off the sketch, and then I'll zoom in and paint on a little detail just like this at the base of each petal. And once the background wash is finished like this, we can move on and do some blending. So I'll switch my brush to the background water blender, and I'll use it at a variety of sizes just to smooth out all the overlapping strokes. And then also wherever the petals are touching, I'm going to try to bridge the gap and kind of blend the colors back and forth. And it's optional, but you can also use the blender at a really small size and blend these details as well. Next, I want to add some kind of strategically placed water stains just to bring out some boundaries between the individual petals. So for that, I'll make a blank layer above my flower, and I'll set this transparency to multiply. For the color, I'll use a pretty saturated reddish orange. And then for the brush, of course, I'll use one of the water stain brushes. And basically what I'm going to do is kind of use it on each petal, and I'm going to chase the edge here just to define the boundary there. And then later on, I'll come back and blend it. But just for now, I'm going to add the water stains like this. Next, I'll switch my brush back to the water blender, and I'm going to blend basically the inside of each of these water stains, but I'm not going to do it perfectly, and I'll leave some hard edges behind. And as you can see, I really only wanted to keep the outer edge of the water stain just to define the edge of the petal. Basically, what happens to the inside edge doesn't really matter, so I left some of those inside lines behind just to add more texture. And sometimes when you use that brush, you miss the edge a little bit, like in this case here. So if you're a perfectionist like me, you can switch over to the liquify tool, set to push, and you can just push this kind of edge back in line. And once you're happy with how the water stains look, I recommend merging them together with the flower layer just to keep things organized. Next, I want to add a major color shift, sort of bleeding out from the center of the flower. And there's quite a trick to this, and this is a new thing that I just learned today. So I'll start by making a layer above my flower, and I want the color shift to be a sort of reddish orange tone. For the brush, it doesn't really matter, but I'll just use the fine liner pen. And I'm going to scribble all around this area here, kind of where I want the color shift to be. And the reason I'm scribbling it like this is just to make it a little bit more random. After that, I'll blend it out using Gaussian blur quite a bit. And then I want this color shift to sort of be limited to just occurring on the flower petals, but not in the white area. So what I just discovered is basically clipping masks. So here's the color shift layer. If I tap on it, it'll bring up the menu. And I can just turn on clipping mask here. And as long as this color shift is directly above the flower, it'll clip it to the shape of it just like that. And one of the reasons I really like this is it lets us kind of modify this color shift separately from the flower petals. So one thing I like to do is use the liquify tool just to add some texture. So this is optional. I'm just going to set it to crystals. You can copy my settings here. And hopefully you can see this here. I have the color shift layer selected here, so it's just going to affect that. And if I sort of spiral this around, you can see something kind of weird is happening on the edges. It's giving it this sort of kind of fingered, kind of wet on wet watercolor effect. So I'm just going to do this randomly until I'm happy with how it looks. And once you're happy with how this effect looks, you can leave that mode just by tapping on the adjustments. And this color shift is still on a separate layer set as a clipping mask. And since things can kind of go wrong in Procreate if you have too many clipping masks, I recommend merging them together with the main thing you're painting as soon as possible, just so you don't accumulate too many stacked clipping masks. Next, I want to show you how to sort of burn the edges of the flower petals to add more contrast. So for this, I'll use the freehand selection tool, and I'm basically just going to select a couple of the edges of the petals like this, and I'll just do 2 as an example. So I'm just barely going along the edge, then I'll circle back, and I'll feather it out just a little bit, probably less than 10% is good. Hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'll darken it, and then shift the hue a little bit towards purple. And it's a subtle effect, but it just drops in that secondary tone just on the edges. And since I like how this looks, I'm going to do it to the other petals as well. Next, I'll add the stamen details, just kind of at the center of the flower, and those will be on a separate layer above it. For the color, I think I'll use a kind of orange tone like this. We can change it later if we want. And for the brush, I recommend the medium quill. And I'm just going to go in there and sort of tap around using kind of a variety of pressures, just because I don't want all the dots to look the same. And this could be good enough as it is, but I want them to look a little bit more random. So it's optional, but you can use the liquify tool again, set to crystals, and just go in there and carefully scribble this around, and it'll shake up those kind of edges and make these look a little bit less uniform. And I think in this case, they ended up being a little bit too small, so I'll scale them up and kind of position them a little bit better. And if you want the details to have more contrast, you can add a few dark orange dots in there as well, just using the fine liner pen. And this flower turned out pretty good, and I think just to finish it up, I think I'll add some leaves. So for that, I'll make a blank layer above everything, and I'll use this sort of desaturated olivey green tone. For the brush, I'll use the medium quill, and I'll just do some stroke-based leaves kind of randomly. So basically, I'm just going to use a very light pressure, then I'll press harder, and then taper it off. I actually think I don't like this green tone, so I'll change it a bit. Yeah, I think that's better. So again, I'll start with a light pressure, then I'll press harder, and then taper it off. And then I'll do a similar thing in reverse, just along the other side there. And all the leaves don't have to be split like this. You can also just do some normal leaves like this. And I'll do a few more just randomly around the flower, but I'll shift the green tone each time just so they're not all the same. And just like that, this watercolor flower is finished. And here's the printed result. And I made this just using my normal Canon Pixma printer, and I printed it on just cheap watercolor paper. Now the Pixma printer is only a 4-color printer and it lacks red ink, so you'll find that it doesn't really get the reds quite right. Usually they'll transform into a sort of brownish orange tone or something like that. So if you are doing a project where you need a lot of flowers like this and you need to print them at home, it might be better to avoid rich reds and stick with pinks, yellows, oranges, and blues. Anyways, if you think I've earned it, please give this video a like, leave a comment below if you made it to the end, and feel free to check out this watercolor rose tutorial next.